The rain wasn't just falling, it was suffocating. Here in New Orleans, the air was already 99% water, and this late July downpour just turned the rest of it into a hot, gray soup. Magazine Street was a blur of bleeding neon, the reds and blues of the bar signs dissolving like ink on the wet asphalt. I stood by the service door, catching a breath of air that wasn't 90 degrees and saturated with garlic. My name is Eliza Quinn. I'm 24 years old, and my life was measured in 8-hour shifts and the number of pages I still had to read for my EMT certification. Laveau Brasserie was the kind of place that sold elevated Cajun to finance guys and the occasional NFL quarterback spending his off-season. The air inside was a physical weight, a blast of expensive air conditioning, fighting a losing battle against the inferno of the kitchen. It smelled like browned butter, seared scallops, and the faint, smoky char of $1,000 worth of prime steak hitting the grill every hour. I shifted my weight. My feet, throbbing in their mandated black Sensible shoes, had stopped being feet hours ago. They were just two dull, aching stumps at the end of my legs. I rubbed my palms on my apron, feeling the familiar ridges of calluses. They were thick on my right hand from carrying trays, and a specific hard little knot was building on my left index finger from polishing the endless parade of wine glasses. My rituals were a suit of armor. Before my shift, in the dim light of my bathroom, I'd spent 10 minutes with a thick, honey-colored concealer, dabbing it over the purpling shadow high on my cheekbone, blending it until it was just a dull ache under the makeup. The silk scarf, a cheap floral print I'd found at a thrift store, was looped artfully around my neck. It was high summer in Louisiana. Wearing a scarf was like wearing a wool blanket, but it was better than the questions. And then there was the black sweatband on my left wrist. Simple, athletic. People just assumed it was a brace for carpal tunnel, a hazard of the job. They were all hazards of a job, just not this one. Eliza, table 12 needs their check, and the party at 7 is asking about their appetizers. Pick up the pace. I bit back the sigh, turning with a smile that felt like it was cracking the concealer. On it, Darla, our manager, lived in a state of perpetual, low-grade panic. She wasn't mean, not really, but she was weak, and that was almost worse. She saw everything in terms of how it might reflect on her, how it might cost her the bonus she needed to pay for her leased Lexus. She saw my scarf and the sweatband and the extra layer of foundation and chose, pointedly, not to see them. I didn't bother offering an excuse. Excuses don't pay the rent. I needed this shift, and I needed the $400-odd I was hoping to pull tonight. My roommate, Sarah, was already short for her half, and the first of the month was looming like another storm front. I just nodded, grabbed the check presenter for 12, and moved back into the main dining room. The noise level was high, a dull roar of expensive conversations and the clatter of silver on porcelain. And then there was the table in the back alcove, table 15. It wasn't that they were loud, it was the opposite. They were a pocket of absolute calm in the chaos. 4 men, all in immaculate dark suits. They hadn't laughed, they hadn't raised their voices. But the tables around them, the loud bachelor party at 14, the giggly anniversary couple at 13 had instinctively lowered their own volume. It was like a ripple of deference spreading out from that one booth. They were new. I'd never seen them before, and I saw everyone. My station put me in their orbit. I'd taken their drink order an hour ago. Now, they needed refills. As I approached, the man at the head of the table looked up. He looked to be about 35. His dark brown hair was combed back from his forehead, severe and neat. He wore a charcoal gray suit that was so perfectly tailored it looked less like clothing and more like a part of him. There was a scar, a thin, silvery line that ran from just below his ear down the hard angle of his jaw. It wasn't a brawler's scar, it was clean, almost surgical. But his eyes were what held me. They were gray, not a soft, cloudy gray, but a hard, flat slate gray. They were calm, utterly unbothered, and yet they carried a weight that made my shoulders tense. It was the kind of stillness that didn't ask for things. It just waited for them to happen. The kind of eyes that could command a room without ever saying a word. His name, according to the reservation, was Soren Marchesi. He hadn't spent more than 10 seconds on the menu before closing it with a quiet thud. While his companions debated the merits of the snapper versus the duck confit, he just watched, not the room, not the other patrons. He'd watched the staff. He watched me, specifically, but not in the way most men watched me, that half-drunk, appreciative to leering stare I was used to deflecting. He watched me the way a craftsman watches a tool. He watched the way I balanced the heavy oval tray on my shoulder, the way I navigated the narrow gap between the bar and the server station, the way my smile never quite reached my eyes. He was, I realized with a jolt, reading me. Reading my efficiency, my fatigue, the way I favored my left foot. It made my skin crawl, but it also made me angry. I wasn't a puzzle to be solved. I was just a girl trying to pay her bills. Now, I loaded the tray. 4 heavy crystal glasses, 2 Sazeracs, a vodka martini, and a coupe of champagne for the man at the end. The tray weighed a solid 15 pounds. I approached the table, starting from the left. "Your Sazerac, sir." I moved to the next man, placing his martini. Then I turned to place the champagne, and it happened. The coupe glass, slick with condensation, skidded a half-inch on the tray. It was nothing, a tiny shift, but it was enough. The balance of the entire 15-pound load shifted. The tray dipped violently. I saw it in slow motion, the champagne tidal waving over the rim, the Sazerac glass toppling. My whole night's pay, my job, Darla's face, all of it flashing in one heart-stopping second. I lurched, my bad wrist screaming in protest as I tried to correct the weight. I was going to drop it. A hand shot out, not grabbing, not pulling. It cupped my elbow, firm and warm, the strength in it absolute. It didn't just stop the fall, it arrested the momentum and, with a pressure that was shockingly precise, pushed my arm up and in, leveraging the tray back to its center of gravity. The glasses settled. Not a single drop was spilled after that first wave. The entire thing took maybe 2 seconds. I was breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm so sorry, sir." My voice was thin, reedy, but Soren Marchesi wasn't looking at the tray. He was looking at my arm. In the lurch and the save, the starched cuff of my white uniform shirt had ridden up. It had pulled free of the black sweatband. Exposed on the pale skin of my forearm was a bracelet of bruises, a hideous mottled ribbon of purple and dark yellow, stark and undeniable in the warm, dim light of the restaurant. It had the distinct, ugly pattern of fingers that had gripped too hard, a rope-like burn from a twisted grip. His gaze dropped to it, just for a heartbeat. 1, 2, then his slate-gray eyes lifted back to mine. The noisy chatter of the brasserie seemed to fall away. The clatter of plates, the sizzle from the kitchen, the rain on the windows, it all went silent. There was nothing in the world but the heavy, suffocating quiet at this table. His face was unreadable. No pity, no anger, no curiosity, just stillness. He leaned in, just slightly. His companions were frozen, watching him. "The kitchen doors here bite." His voice was low, a soft rumble that barely carried to my ears, but there was no warmth in it. It was cold, laced with a faint, sharp thread of mockery. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A hot flush of shame and fear climbed my neck, so intense it made me dizzy. It was worse than any look of pity. I forced a laugh. It sounded like a bird choking. "Just clumsy, sir, all me." I pulled my arm back, tugging the sleeve down, fumbling to hide the sweatband and the skin above it. My fingers were trembling. "My apologies. I'll be right back with your drinks." I didn't wait for a dismissal. I turned and fled, the heavy tray suddenly weightless. I made it to the server station, set the tray down, and leaned against the wall, my lungs burning. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't pick up a glass. I avoided the table for the rest of the night, sending another server to handle their dessert order and their check. When it was finally time to clear the table, Long after they had gone, I approached it with dread. They had paid in cash, a thick wad of hundreds for a bill that was maybe half that, but that wasn't what stopped me. Tucked neatly beside the signed check was a business card. It wasn't the usual glossy white, it was matte black, thick as cardstock. The lettering embossed and simple. Harborline Import Company. There was no address, no website, just a name and, below it, a 10-digit number written in clean, strong black ink, a private number. I picked it up, the edges sharp against my calloused fingers. As I slipped it into my apron pocket, I heard his voice again, that cold, quiet rumble. The kitchen doors here bite. I looked back at the empty table, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. As I turned to go, I remembered the last thing he'd said. He caught my eye just as he was shrugging into his suit jacket. He hadn't smiled. He'd just held my gaze for 1 second and added, so quietly only I could have heard it, "If the door bites again?" The shift ended at 2 a.m. The last of the finance guys had finally staggered out into the rain, leaving behind a battlefield of crumpled napkins, half-empty glasses, and a tip that was about 50% of what it should have been. My feet were 2 solid blocks of pain, the throb in my wrist a dull, constant echo. The adrenaline from the near disaster with Soren Marchese's table had faded hours ago, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the gritty, lingering shame of being seen. Darla was in her office, clacking away at her keyboard, probably recalculating the night's liquor percentages. The kitchen was dark, the stainless steel gleaming cold under the single ghost light. I emptied my apron. The cash, maybe $300. Not the 4 I'd hoped for, feeling damp and flimsy. And then my fingers brushed the card. Harborline Import Company. It was still there, stiff and sharp in my pocket. I pulled it out. The matte black surface seemed to drink the weak light, that 10-digit number, written in that strong, deliberate hand. If the door bites again? I shivered. Despite the humidity, it felt less like a lifeline and more like an anchor. I didn't know what kind of game he was playing, but I knew, with a certainty that settled in my stomach like cold cement, that I was a pawn in it. I shoved the card into the cheap wallet in my purse, zipped it, and pushed the thought away. I had to read 20 pages on trauma-induced circulatory shock before I could sleep. I grabbed my bag, waved a tired "Night, Darla," and pushed open the heavy steel service door. The alley was a canyon of wet brick and darkness. The rain had eased to a thick, clinging mist. It smelled of stale beer from the kegs, wet garbage, and something else. Bourbon. He was leaning against the opposite wall, just outside the weak circle of the exit light, a shadow detaching itself from the others. "You're late," Brent said. My heart didn't just drop, it seized. I froze, my hands still on the door. "Brent, what are you doing here? I told you not to come here." He pushed off the wall, and the light caught the wet gleam in his eyes. He was tall, wiry, with that studied, careless look of a man who'd been handsome at 19 and was trying to coast on it at 27. He was a wannabe DJ, a nightlife promoter, which meant he knew a lot of bartenders who gave him free drinks. "I missed you," he said, and the smell of cheap bourbon and rain rolled off him, turning my stomach. He'd promised, again just 3 days ago, with watery, repentant eyes. He had promised he was done. "You're not supposed to be here," I repeated, my voice flat. I started to walk past him, toward the street. "I'm tired, Brent, I'm going home." He moved, blocking me. It was fast, that sudden, snake-like speed that always came after the 3rd drink. In a hurry. "Who are you smiling at tonight, Eliza?" The accusation was so familiar, so worn, it was almost a script. "I'm a waitress. I smile at everyone, it's the job. Move." "The job," he sneered. "Right, I saw you. Through the window, table in the back, that guy in the suit. You were all smiles for him." I almost dropped a tray of drinks on him. I was apologizing. I tried to push past, but he was ready. His hand shot out and grabbed my left wrist. The pain was electric. He hadn't just grabbed it. His fingers had found, with an animal instinct, the exact, already traumatized flesh hidden beneath the sweatband. He squeezed, the old bruises screamed in protest, and a fresh, sharp agony lanced up my arm. "Aw, Brent, stop, you're hurting me." "Am I?" He twisted. Just a small motion, a turn of his wrist, but it sent me lurching off balance. My back slammed into the damp, gritty brick wall of the alley. The impact knocked the air from my lungs in a sharp woof. "You think I don't see you flirting with those rich assholes for a 20% tip?" "I'm not," I gasped, pushing against his chest, but he had me pinned. His other hand came up, bracing against the wall next to my head. I was boxed in. "Let me go, Brent, you're drunk." "I'm not drunk enough to miss this." He was snarling now, his face inches from mine. "You come home smelling like their expensive food, wearing that stupid scarf." My eyes darted past his shoulder, down the alley to the street. I was looking for anything. A passing car, a cop, a late-night dog walker. The heavy steel door of the restaurant opened a crack. Darla's head poked out, her blonde hair stark against the darkness. "Eliza is everything." Her eyes adjusted. She saw Brent. She saw his hand clamped on my wrist, my body pressed against the wall, the look on his face. Her mouth opened, and then it closed. Her eyes widened, not in anger, but in calculation. Fear. Not for me. Fear of a scene. Fear of a bad review. Fear of losing the late-night finance crowd. She pulled her head back. The door clicked shut. The sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock turning, a final, definitive click that said, "You are alone. You are always alone." Brent laughed, a low, triumphant sound. He'd seen it, too. "See, nobody cares. Only me. I'm the only one who really cares about you, Eliza." He relaxed his grip just slightly, only to re-grab my arm and yank me away from the wall. He started pulling me toward the parking lot at the end of the alley. "We're going home. We're going to talk about this." "No." I dug my heels in, but the pavement was slick. My cheap purse, slung over my shoulder, swung wildly. He jerked me again, hard. The thin strap snapped. The bag hit the wet asphalt with a dull thud. It wasn't a good purse. The zipper was broken. My life spilled out onto the pavement, a tube of lipstick, a pen, a scattered fan of my EMT flashcards, the damp wad of my night's tips, and the matte black card. It landed face up, right in the center of a weak puddle reflecting the yellow streetlight. It seemed to glow against the dark. Wet ground. Harbor Line Import Company. Brent stopped. He'd been so focused on me. He hadn't seen anything else. Now he looked down. He let go of my wrist to bend over and pick it up. "What the hell is this?" He held it between two fingers, as if it were dirty. "Harbor Line Import. Fancy." He flipped it over, saw the handwritten number. His whole posture changed. The hot, sloppy anger vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian suspicion. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "So this is it, huh?" he sneered, waving the card. "This is the guy from the restaurant already handing out his private number. What's the matter, Eliza? My tip's not good enough for you. Now you handing out your number to guys in $1,000 silver watches." "Give that back," I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of fear. Not just of him, but of what he was holding. "Or what you'll call your new boyfriend?" He laughed and started to shove the card into his own pocket. "The boss sent me to take you home." The voice came from the mouth of the alley. It was deep, calm, and held zero emotion. Brent spun around. I looked past him. A man was standing there. No, not a man, a mountain. He was massive, over 6'5" and wide as a refrigerator, poured into a black suit that looked like it was made of canvas. He was bald, with a face that looked like it had been carved from a block of wood. He was the one I'd seen leaning against the matte black SUV across the street. The SUV was still there. I now saw, parked just at the curb, its engine idling with a low, predatory rumble. No lights. The big man's name was Rook. He was, I knew instinctively, Soren Marchese's bodyguard. He'd been at the table, sitting silently in the background. Brent, fueled by bourbon and ego, bristled. "Who the hell are you? Get out of here. This is a private conversation with my girlfriend." He did the stupidest thing I'd ever seen anyone do. He shoved Rook. He put both hands on the big man's chest and pushed hard. It was like watching a fly hit a statue. Rook didn't move. He didn't brace himself. He didn't even blink. He just absorbed the impact as if it hadn't happened. He didn't look at Brent. Instead, he slowly, deliberately, tilted his head and looked up, past Brent, past the roof of the brasserie, toward the overpass. I followed his gaze. A small, single red light was blinking, a traffic camera. Rook looked back at Brent, his expression utterly blank. The silence in the alley was absolute, broken only by the drip of water from a gutter and the distant hum of the SUV. Brent's bravado was crumbling. The non-reaction was 1,000 times more terrifying than if Rook had hit him back. He took a half-step back, his chest hitching. Then, my phone buzzed. It was in my apron pocket, which I was still wearing. The vibration was a violent shock against my hip. I fumbled for it, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Unknown number. My thumb slid across the screen. I put it to my ear, my eyes still locked on Rook. "Hello?" I whispered. "Step onto the curb, Eliza." The voice, Soren Marchese, that same cold, quiet rumble from the restaurant. But now it was in my ear, intimate and absolute. "To the right of the vehicle, leave the rest to us." It wasn't a request, it was an extraction. I looked at Brent, who was staring at Rook. I looked at Rook, who was staring at Brent. I looked at the open door of the SUV, just 20 feet away. Eliza Brent's voice was suddenly uncertain. "Who is that?" I made my choice. I ducked under Brent's arm. He was too stunned to react and scrambled over my spilled belongings. I didn't stop to pick anything up. I ran the 20 feet to the curb and stood where he'd told me, by the rear passenger door of the black SUV. The door unlocked with a soft, expensive thunk. Brent's stupor broke. "Eliza, get back here! What the hell do you think you're doing?" He lunged, not for me, but for Rook. "You can't just—" He swung a wild, drunken punch. Rook wasn't there. He'd taken a half-step back, the punch whiffing on empty, rain-soaked air. Brent stumbled, overbalanced. In that same impossibly fluid motion, Rook's hand, a hand the size of a catcher's mitt, dipped into his own suit jacket and came out with something small. He stepped into Brent's stumble, and before Brent could recover, Rook had slipped the object neatly into the breast pocket of his denim jacket. It was a reverse pickpocket. It was surgical. Brent froze, his hands flailing. He clutched at his chest. What did you do? What did you put on me?" Rook just stared at him. He hadn't said a word since his first sentence. Brent's fingers dug into his pocket. He pulled the thing out. It wasn't a card. It was a badge, heavy, silver, and embossed, set into a black leather holder. It glinted in the streetlight. Even from where I stood, I could read the words stamped in the metal. Gulf Integrity Bureau. Brent's face, which had been flushed with booze and anger, went the color of ash. The bourbon courage evaporated, leaving a sick, hollow-eyed terror. Gee, I'd heard the stories. Everybody in the quarter had. They weren't cops. They weren't feds. They were the people who investigated other people. The ones who, the rumors said, handled the kinds of problems the city didn't want to admit it had. The ones with no website, no public office, and no paper trail. Brent looked from the badge to Rook, to the dark, idling SUV where I was standing. His entire body was trembling. The hunter had just realized he was bait. I was still standing by the curb, my hand over my mouth, the phone still pressed to my ear. Long after the line had gone dead, I could feel the thrum of the SUV's engine through the soles of my shoes. A low, steady vibration that was the only solid thing in a world that had just dissolved. Brent was frozen, staring at the GIB badge in his hand like it was a live rattlesnake. His face, usually so ruddy with booze and confidence, was the color of dirty dishwater. The back window of the SUV, tinted to an impenetrable black, slid down, not all the way, just 3 inches, a crack. I expected Soren Marchesi to get out. I expected him to square off with Brent, to shout, to do something physical. Instead, I saw his silhouette against the glow of the opposite streetlight. He was holding a phone. He wasn't even looking at Brent. He was looking at his screen, his thumb moving slightly. He was multitasking. This entire terrifying tableau in a dark alley was just one item on his night's to-do list. The casual, administrative nature of it was 1,000 times more frightening than a drawn weapon. Brent's phone, still clutched in his other hand, suddenly erupted. It wasn't a single ring or a buzz. It was a violent, angry swarm of notifications. Bzzzt, 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 bzzzt. It sounded like a trapped hornet against his palm. He jumped, fumbling the GIB badge, juggling it with the phone. He finally managed to unlock the screen, his thumb smearing across the glass. He read. I watched his face collapse. I couldn't see the screen, but I didn't need to. I saw his eyes widen, scanning, scrolling. I saw the way he'd look up from the phone, his gaze darting wildly, first to the blinking red eye of the traffic camera Rook had pointed out, then down the street to where his own beat-up sedan was parked. He knew he'd been watched. He knew this wasn't random. This was May. This was the legal aid. This was the other side of Soren Marchesi's power. It wasn't just the iron fist of Rook. It was the invisible, suffocating web of information. What was she sending him? I could only imagine. A picture. It had to be. A grainy photo, time-stamped, of him leaving the King Creole bar last Tuesday at 3 a.m., getting into his car, a DUI he got away with. Then another, a short, silent video clip. Him in the back room of that club he promoted at, his head bent low, exchanging a small bag for a wad of cash. Then the lists. His jaw went slack and a low, sick sound escaped his throat. The debts. I knew he was in trouble. He was always borrowing 20, then 50, from my tips. But this was something else. The way his face crumpled. He was looking at numbers with too many zeros. Not just bar tabs, gambling sheets from a bookie in Algiers, a payday loan shark from the West Bank. He was owned, leveraged, and filed away. And then, the last message. He read it out loud, a horrified, strangled whisper that barely carried across the pavement. Notice of random inspection, Tri-Parish Organized Crime Task Force. He didn't even get the words fully out of his mouth before it happened. As if summoned by the incantation. A car turned the corner onto Magazine Street. It wasn't an NOPD cruiser. It was black and white, but the decals were different, sharper, aggressive. Tri-Parish Organized Crime Task Force. The logo on the side was a stylized, predatory heron. It had to be fake. This was all theater. It was a rented car with magnetic decals, a prop. But it looked so real. The light bar was flush against the roof, sleek and modern. The spotlight mounted by the A-pillar looked functional. The two men inside were blurred shadows, but they looked the part. The cruiser didn't speed. It didn't flash its lights. It cruised. It slowed as it passed the mouth of the alley. The two officers inside didn't look at us. They didn't look at Rook, or me, or Brent. They looked at Brent's car. They slowed, their gazes fixed on his license plate. The driver said something to the passenger, who seemed to note it down. Then, just as slowly, they accelerated and continued down the street, disappearing into the mist. The performance was devastating. Brent made a sound, a wet, choking gasp. The bourbon was gone. He was stone cold, terrified, sober. He was shaking so violently that the heavy GIB badge rattled against the screen of his phone. He looked at the badge, the fake one, the real one, and then at the disappearing taillights of the fake real task force. He didn't know. He couldn't tell. And that, I realized, was the entire point. He was trapped in a cage where he couldn't distinguish the stage prop from the steel bar. It all felt real enough to hold him. Rook finally moved. He took one deliberate, heavy step toward Brent. Brent flinched, shrinking back, holding his hands up. He was holding the phone and the badge out, as if offering them in surrender. I didn't. But Rook wasn't interested in the badge. With a delicacy that was shocking for a man his size, he plucked the other card, Soren's matte black Harbor Line card, the one Brent had snatched from the pavement from Brent's trembling fingers. Brent was too paralyzed to resist. Rook turned. He crossed the 5 feet of pavement that separated us. He didn't look at my face. He didn't acknowledge my fear. He simply took my right hand, the one that wasn't throbbing, and placed the stiff, sharp-edged card firmly in my palm. "You'll need this number," he rumbled. It was only the second time he'd spoken. It sounded final. He then gestured to the ground, to the pathetic splatter of my life on the wet asphalt, my flashcards, my lipstick, the damp, crumpled wad of my night's tips. With one massive hand, he swept them all up. He pushed them back into my cheap purse, the zipper which had been broken for 6 months. He gripped between his thumb and forefinger and, with a terrifying, precise twist, forced the metal teeth to mesh. He zipped it closed and handed the bag to me. He had, in 10 seconds, retrieved and repaired my life from the gutter. I clutched the bag to my chest, the black card digging into my palm. This wasn't a rescue. A rescue is heroic. This was an acquisition, a transfer of assets. No, that wasn't right either. It was an extraction, a clean, cold, brutally efficient removal. The window of the SUV was still cracked open. "You're in debt for more than just money, Mr. Tolley." Soren Marchese's voice, still quiet, still detached. He was finally looking at Brent, a shadow addressing a ghost. Brent froze. "Choose what you want to lose." That was it. There was no or else. There was no threat of what would happen. It was a statement of fact, a line item on a ledger. You are over-leveraged. Liquidate an asset. He was telling Brent to choose. The car, now tagged by the task force. His freedom, now threatened by the GIB. His future, now documented by May. Or me. He was being given a choice, and he was being told to choose to lose me. Brent looked at the badge in his hand. He looked at Rook. He looked at the disappearing taillights of the cruiser. He looked at me. And for the first time, I didn't see anger. I didn't see possession. I didn't even see hatred. I saw pure, bottom-of-the-barrel, animal panic. He wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. He did the only thing he had left. He tried to reclaim a shred of dignity he had already lost. You can't do this," he stammered, pointing a shaking finger. Not at Soren, not at Rook, at me. "Eliza, this isn't over. You don't know who you're messing with." It was the weakest threat I'd ever heard. It was the bluff of a man holding a pair of twos against a royal flush. He shoved the GIB badge into his jacket pocket as if the very touch of it was burning his skin. He scrambled, half tripping over his own feet, and he ran. He ran, slipping on the wet pavement, down the alley, away from us, toward his car. He yanked his car door open, threw himself inside, and peeled out, his tires finally making that desperate, screaming sound that Soren Marchese's car was too dignified to make. The alley was silent again. The mist was closing in. It was just me, Rook, and the idling SUV. The front passenger door clicked open. Rook didn't look at me. He just nodded at the open door. "Get in." I looked at the dark, plush interior. I looked at the dark, wet alley. I looked at the black card in my hand. I was exhausted. I was terrified. But I was, for the first time in a very long time, not being dragged by the wrist. I got in the car. The heavy door closed with a solid, insulated thunk, sealing out the sound of the rain and the smell of the bourbon. Rook got in the driver's side, his presence filling the cab. The SUV didn't peel out. There was no lurch of acceleration. It just pulled away. It glided into the misty street, the V8 engine, a low, confident hum. The only sound was the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers and the faint, clean smell of wet rubber on the asphalt. The show was over. The ride to my apartment was silent. The SUV was like a bank vault on wheels. The thwack-thwack of the wipers was a hypnotic dead sound, completely insulated from the outside world. I sat in the plush passenger seat, my wet, cheap server uniform smelling of fried oysters and fear against the rich, clean scent of the leather. Rook didn't speak. He just drove, his massive hands resting lightly on the wheel, his movements economical and precise. I lived in the Garden District, but on the wrong side of St. Charles, in a crumbling 3-story walk-up with peeling paint and iron lace that was rusting through. It was a world away from the kind of car I was in. Rook pulled up to the curb. I expected him to just stop, to let me out. The engine kept rumbling. Then he put the car in park, got out, and walked around to my door, opening it for me. It was so formal, so strangely polite, it set my teeth on edge. I can get it," I mumbled, sliding out, clutching my repaired purse to my chest. He just grunted, a low sound, and walked with me to the main door, his presence a solid, unmovable shadow at my back. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly that the metal scraped uselessly against the lock. "Let me," he rumbled. I didn't argue. I handed him the keys, and he took the ring, selected the right key with an instinct that was unnerving, and opened the heavy door. The entryway smelled like damp plaster and old wiring. He stepped just inside, holding the door, nodding his head toward the stairs. "Go on." I walked up the 2 flights, my steps echoing on the worn wooden treads. Rook didn't follow, but I felt him. He was waiting at the bottom, a sentinel at the gate. My apartment was 3B. I put my key in the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. And my heart stopped. He was already there. Soren Marchesi was standing in my tiny, humid living room. He wasn't sitting on my threadbare couch or looking through my things. He was standing just inside the door, as if he had only just materialized from the shadows. He'd beaten us here. Of course he had. May. She would have had my address on file before I'd even finished my shift. My apartment was awful. The ceiling fan, wobbling on its post, made a low, rhythmic click, click, click as it stirred the hot, wet air. A stack of EMT textbooks was piled on the floor next to a coffee mug from this morning. It was cheap, it was small, and he was taking up all the air in it. He was still in his charcoal suit, but he'd taken off the jacket. It was folded perfectly over the back of my one good kitchen chair. He was in his white shirt. The sleeves rolled up his forearms exactly twice, revealing a thin, expensive watch and arms that were far more solid than I'd expected. But he wasn't looking at my apartment. He was looking at me, and he was standing just at the threshold, 1 foot in the hall, 1 foot in my room, a perfect, polite guest, waiting. "May I?" he asked. His voice was quiet, the same low rumble, but in this tiny space, it was overwhelming. I was too numb to speak. I just nodded, stepping back. He walked in, and he didn't pace, he didn't prowl. He walked to my tiny kitchenette counter and set down a black nylon bag. It wasn't a briefcase. I recognized it. It was an EMT-grade trauma kit, a professional one, far better than the cheap canvas ones we used in my certification class. "Sit, Eliza," he said. It wasn't a command. It was just a fact. I sank onto one of the 2 rickety wooden stools at the counter, the one I used for studying. My legs wouldn't have held me for another second. He unzipped the bag. It opened neatly, revealing organized elastic loops, mesh pockets, and plastic containers. He wasn't fumbling. He knew exactly where everything was. His hands were clean, his fingernails short and perfect. "Your wrist," he said. I automatically tugged the cuff of my shirt down, the old, useless gesture of hiding. "And the scarf," he added, his voice gentle but absolute. My blood ran cold. He'd seen it. In the restaurant, under the lights, he'd seen that, too. Slowly, my fingers trembling, I reached up and unwound the cheap floral scarf. The hot, humid air hit the tender skin of my neck, and I felt the flush of shame rise, worse than any pain. I didn't need a mirror to know what was there. The faint, yellowish outline on my cheekbone, the darker shadows on my throat. He didn't say a word about them. He didn't say, "He did this," or "What happened?" He just knew. He took out a chemical cold pack, the kind you snap. He cracked it, and the sudden fizz of the reaction was loud in the clicking silence of the room. He wrapped it in a thin, sterile gauze. Left arm. I held it out. A specimen. I slid the black sweatband off. The skin underneath was raw. The fresh, violent red from Brent's grip in the alley was a bright, angry brand laid directly over the old, mottled purple and yellow stains. It was hideous. I wanted to pull it back, to hide, to apologize for its ugliness. Soren just looked at it, his gray eyes flat and unreadable. He didn't wince. He didn't look angry. He looked like a specialist diagnosing a problem. His fingers, warm and dry, lightly touched the skin around the swelling. His touch was so light it was almost not there. He was probing the bone, the joint. "Hurt?" he asked, pressing a spot near my thumb. "A little." "Here." He moved up an inch. I sucked in a sharp breath. "Yes. It's not broken." He diagnosed, his voice calm. "Just a severe sprain." He twisted it hard. He said it like he was reading a weather report. He gently laid the cold pack over the worst of the swelling. The cold was a sudden, violent shock. It bit deep, a clean pain that burned away the dull throb. It was so intense, so immediate, that my breathing hitched. A single, hot tear of pure relief and exhaustion escaped my eye and rolled down my cheek. I wiped at it, furious. "I'm not—" "Look at me," he commanded, still quiet. I did. His gray eyes were steady. They weren't soft with pity. They were just present, focused. "Breathe in," he said. I did, a shaky, broken gasp. "Now, breathe out. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My voice was a reedy whisper next to his low, steady count. The fan clicked on 3 and 7. Again, in. I breathed in. Out. 1, 2, 3. We did it 5 times. I counted with him, my voice getting steadier, the numbers pulling me out of the panic. The sharp, burning cold on my wrist settled into a deep, manageable numbness. My heartbeat, which had been hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, slowed. It fell into rhythm with his voice. He had just taken control of my autonomic nervous system in under a minute. He let the silence settle again, then took out a small tube, arnica gel. He applied it with the same light, professional touch to the older bruises on my arm, the ones that were already yellowing. He worked with a focused, impersonal efficiency. And he kept his distance. He was close enough to tend to my arm, but his body was angled away. He wasn't looming, he wasn't crowding me. He was giving me a full arm's length of space, a bubble of respect I didn't even know I needed. But his gaze was closer. It was not at an arm's length. His gaze was right on my skin, in my eyes, on the fear I was trying to hide. He was standing 3 feet away, but his eyes were holding my chin, telling me he saw everything. The click, click, click of the fan filled the void. "What is jib?" I finally whispered. The question was burning in my throat. "The Gulf Integrity Bureau." He finished wrapping my wrist in a fresh black compression bandage, his movements neat and economical. He taped it off, snipping the end with a small pair of shears from the kit. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. He looked up at me. "It's a way," he said, his voice low, "to remind bad people that the Gulf has eyes." "Is it real?" "It's real enough to matter." He closed the kit. The zip of the zipper was a sound of finality. He reached into the inner pocket of his folded suit jacket. He pulled out something small, something white. It was a plastic square, no bigger than a quarter, with a single small black button in the center. He came around the counter. I tensed, but he didn't stop at me. He bent down, reached under the lip of the laminate countertop where I was sitting, and pressed it there. It stuck, invisible. "This is for you," he said, his voice softening for the first time. "Don't be ashamed to need help. Eliza, it's not weakness. It's just a fact." I looked at him, confused. "What is it?" "A panic button, but it doesn't call 911. Their response time is over 10 minutes in this district." He knew that. Of course he knew that. "It calls Rook. He's never more than 5 minutes from this address. Not anymore. If you are here, and you feel unsafe for any reason, from anyone you press it." From anyone, the implication hung in the hot, humid air between us. Even from him. The weight of the night, the fear, the alley, the escape, this strange, intense man in my kitchen crashed down on me. I put my good hand, my right hand, on the counter to steady myself. It was shaking. A fine, uncontrollable tremor. My fingers slid on the smooth, cheap laminate. I was trying to find a grip, something solid. His hand was suddenly there. He didn't grab my hand. He didn't pat it. He didn't try to hold it. He did something I could never have predicted. He placed his own hand on the counter, palm down, and slid it forward until his wrist, the one with the expensive, thin watch, was directly under my trembling fingers. It was an offer, a mooring. My fingers found it. I curled them, just slightly, resting them on the solid, warm bone and the steady, shockingly slow pulse of his wrist. It wasn't a sexual touch. It wasn't even a comforting one. It was a gesture of ballast. It was him lending me his stillness. I felt his pulse, strong and even, under my fingertips, and my own trembling began to subside. After a long moment, I drew my hand back, tucking it in my lap. He nodded, as if I'd done the right thing. He picked up his suit jacket, slung it over his shoulder, and grabbed the EMT kit. He walked to the door, which I had left open. He stopped in the frame, a tall, dark silhouette against the flickering, piss-yellow light of my apartment hallway. He turned his head, his gray eyes finding mine in the dimness. "If any door bites again, Eliza," he said, and his voice was cold steel again. "I'll be faster than I was tonight." He didn't say goodbye, just turned and walked away. I heard his expensive leather shoes on the cheap linoleum. I heard him descend the stairs. I heard the faint rumble of his voice, speaking one word to Rook, and then the heavy front door of the building closed with a solid, definitive thud. I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding since I saw him at table 15. I walked to my door and locked it. I slid the deadbolt. Then I went to the kitchen counter. I sat back down on the stool. I reached underneath, my fingers tracing the outline of the cheap laminate. And then I felt it. The small plastic square, the button. I sat there for a very long time, in the heat, with the click, click, click of the fan, my hand resting just inches from the call button that connected my ruined little life to his. A week passed, a week of silence. Brent was gone. Not just not here, but erased. There were no 37 missed calls in the middle of the night, no angry, misspelled texts accusing me of things I hadn't done. No shadow waiting by the dumpsters. The silence he left behind was a physical void. It was so vast and absolute that it had its own sound, a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The world had stopped screaming at me, and I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I threw myself into motion. I took every shift Darla offered. She gave them to me with a new, nervous respect, her eyes never quite meeting mine. She hadn't mentioned the alley, she never would. I worked doubles, stacking tables and polishing glasses until my hands were raw and my feet were just distant. Throbbing aches. When I wasn't at Laveau, I was in class. I sat in the front row of my EMT certification course, my new compression bandage a stark black line on my arm under my scrubs. I memorized the signs of cardiogenic shock and the steps for trauma assessment, the clinical, detached language, a balm on the raw, messy reality of my own trauma. And I felt watched. It wasn't the hot, paranoid, unpredictable gaze of Brent. This was different. This was cold, steady, and constant. When I left my apartment in the mornings, the matte black SUV would be parked down the street, facing my building. When I left the community college campus late at night, it would be there again, parked under a broken streetlight. Rook. He never approached. He never waved. He was just a fact, a piece of architecture, a promise and a threat, all wrapped in one. I never touched the button under my kitchen counter. I didn't have to. The protection was already total. Then, on a Tuesday, he came back. I was slammed, carrying 2 plates of snapper pontchartrain. When I saw him, he wasn't at a big table, not in the alcove. He was at a small 2-top near the bar, the one with the clear view of the service doors and the kitchen pass. He was alone. My knees almost buckled, the plates wobbled. I managed to deliver them, my hands shaking, and retreated to the server station, my heart hammering. He just sat. He ordered a coffee and an appetizer. He read a thin stack of papers he'd brought in a leather folio. And he watched. He didn't stare. It was just glances. He'd look up when I crossed the dining room. His eyes would track me as I spoke to Darla. He was doing what he did that first night, reading. He came back on Wednesday. Same table. This time he ordered dinner. I had to be the one to take his order. "Mr. Marchese," I said, my voice barely a whisper. My pen was slipping in my damp palm. "Eliza." He didn't look up from his menu right away. "How was your practical on airway management?" I froze. "What?" He finally lifted his gaze. Those slate gray eyes were calm, almost academic. "Your Tuesday night class, the practical." He knew my schedule, and he knew my curriculum. The depth of his information, the specificity of it was terrifying, and in a way that shamed me. It was steadying. Brent had never known what day my classes were. "It was fine," I stammered. "I intubated the dummy on the first try." "Good," he said, as if I'd passed a test for him. "I'll have the duck confit and another coffee." He was there on Thursday, too, 3 nights in a row. He spoke to me, but only in those short, precise bursts. He'd ask about my shift. He'd ask if I'd finished the chapter on pharmacology. He was talking to me just enough to keep the crushing loneliness of my new, empty, silent life at bay. He was a presence, not a pressure. Then came Friday, the 4th night. The storm had been threatening all day, the sky a sick, bruised green. By 8 p.m., the city was in a deluge. This wasn't rain, it was a tropical storm that had decided to sit on top of New Orleans and unload the entire Gulf of Mexico. The wind was shrieking. Water was running in sheets down Magazine Street. The restaurant was a ghost town. We had 3 tables, all of whom paid and fled by 8:30. By 9, Darla was wringing her hands. "That's it. We're closing. I can't ask you all to stay. The streets are flooding. Cash out. Go home. Be safe." The staff vanished in about 45 seconds. They were a flurry of aprons and cash outs, and then the kitchen went dark. The front doors were locked, and I was alone in the dining room, finishing my last bit of side work. Almost alone. Soren was still at his table. He was nursing a final espresso, watching the window, where the rain was lashing the glass so hard it looked like it might break. I finished wiping down the service bar, my movements stiff and awkward. He hadn't moved. He was just watching the storm. "Mr. Marchese," I said, my voice too loud in the empty, quiet room. We're closed." He turned his head. "I know. You need to go." He looked back at the window. The street was no longer a street. It was a fast-moving, brown river, already halfway up the tires of the parked cars. "I don't think you're going anywhere, Eliza." As if the storm had been listening. There was a deafening crack of thunder. It wasn't a rumble. It was an explosion. Right overhead, the entire building shook. And the lights went out. I screamed, just a small, sharp sound. I was plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. The only light was the pale, ghostly green of the emergency exit signs. The only sound was my own frantic heartbeat and the roar of the rain, which now sounded like 1,000 drums beating on the roof. "It's all right, you know," his voice came out of the dark, preternaturally calm. "Stay there." A second later, my phone's flashlight beam sliced the darkness. I had it in my apron, but a brighter, cleaner beam was already on. He was standing, his own phone's light cutting a path. "The main breaker tripped," he said. He walked toward the back of the restaurant, his beam illuminating the wet, dark tables. The kitchen's flooding. I followed him, stumbling. The alley, the service door. "We'll be underwater," he finished. "We're not getting out that way." He wasn't panicked. He was just assessing. He led me past the dark kitchen, toward the private dining rooms. "The wine cellar," he said, more to himself than to me. "It has a separate thermostat. It should be on its own circuit." He was talking about the glass-walled display cellar, a small 1,000-square-foot room where they kept the premier cruise. He tried the handle. Locked. Of course. "Darla," I started. "Move back." He wasn't asking. He took a heavy linen napkin from a nearby table setting, wrapped it around his fist, and, with a single, economical, brutal thud, punched the glass panel right next to the electronic lock. The glass didn't shatter, it spider-webbed. It was safety glass. He pushed his hand through, unwrapped the napkin, and fumbled on the inside. I heard the click of the manual override. He pulled the door open. "In," he said. I hesitated. "It's the only room in the building that's dry, climate-controlled, and has walls we can see. Eliza, get in." I slipped inside. He followed, pulling the heavy door shut. The silence was immediate. The roar of the storm was muffled, distant, and the room was lit, not by harsh emergency lights, but by the warm, amber accent lights designed to make the bottles glow. We were in a small, warm, glass box, surrounded by dark wood and millions of dollars of wine. The rain on the roof was no longer a roar. It was a deep, rhythmic drumming like hands on stretched leather. We just stood there for a long moment, breathing. The air was cool and smelled of cork and dust. He was close. The cellar was small, maybe 8 feet wide. He was standing by the door, and I was near the back racks. He was just a silhouette against the amber light. He was watching my face. He could see the tracks of the tears I hadn't even realized had fallen. The panic was still vibrating in my chest. He took a step, then another. He moved slowly as if approaching a spooked animal. He stopped when he was an arm's length away. "You're safe," he said. It wasn't a platitude, it was a statement of fact. "I know," I whispered. I didn't, but I wanted to. He lifted his hand. I saw it coming. I flinched. My body, conditioned by Brent, tensed for the grab, the pain. He saw the flinch, and he stopped. His hand froze in midair. He didn't pull it back. He just held it there, letting me see it, letting me see there was no anger in it. Then, slowly, he turned his hand over. He touched my cheek, not with his palm, but with the back of his hand, his knuckles. It was the lightest, most respectful touch I had ever felt. His skin was warm, slightly rough. It wasn't a grasp, it was a question. "May I?" he asked. His voice was a low rumble, almost lost in the sound of the storm. I couldn't find my voice. My entire world had narrowed to the feeling of his knuckles on my skin. I gave a single, jerky nod. He leaned in. He moved so slowly it was agonizing. He was giving me every second to say no, to pull away, to push the panic button I wasn't wearing. His lips touched mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a breath, a suggestion. It was warm, and it was devastatingly gentle. I had been braced for impact, and instead, I got stillness. I must have leaned in, because the pressure changed. It became a real kiss. It was still slow, still achingly careful, but it was no longer a question. It was an answer. My hands, which had been frozen at my sides, came up. I didn't know where to put them. They found his forearms, gripping the rolled-up, starchy cotton of his sleeves. The kiss deepened. It was a discovery. I tasted the faint, bitter trace of his espresso, and he must have tasted me because he hesitated. "Spearmint," he murmured against my mouth. I'd been chewing gum, a nervous, frantic habit, the taste of it, the salt of my own tears, the rain on the roof. It was overwhelming. He didn't pull me closer, not in a rough way. His other hand, the one that wasn't cupping my face, found my waist. It just rested there, a warm, solid, grounding weight on my apron. His fingers didn't dig. His hand didn't roam. It just held. My heart was no longer hammering with fear. It was thundering with something else, something hot and sharp and terrifyingly new. I could feel his breath, warm and even, ghosting my skin. I could feel the solid, steady beat of his heart through the hands I had on his arms. Then, just as the kiss was starting to build, to tip over into that desperate, frantic territory I knew so well, he stopped. He pulled back. Not all the way. He rested his forehead against mine. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. It came out as a shaky, ridiculous sound, almost a giggle. A tiny, startled laugh of pure, unadulterated relief escaped him, too. A puff of warm air against my skin. We were just standing there, in a rich man's wine cellar, hiding from a flood, breathing each other's air. He saw me shift my weight. My feet, after a 16-hour day, were finally giving out. He stepped back, breaking the spell, but only partially. He looked around, his gaze landing on a low, wooden crate used for displaying a magnum of champagne. He shrugged out of his suit vest, the gray wool one he'd been wearing. He folded it, once, neatly, and laid it on top of the crate, creating a small, perfect cushion. "Sit, Nani," he said. I sat. The wood was solid beneath me. He didn't sit, but he didn't move away either. He leaned against the wine rack opposite me, the space between us now only a few feet. And then he reached across the gap and took my hand, not my injured wrist, my other one. His fingers interlaced with mine. His palm was warm, dry, and impossibly strong. He didn't squeeze. He just held. He anchored me. We sat in the warm, amber-lit silence, listening to the rain slowly, finally, begin to ease. The drumming on the roof softened to a steady rhythm. We sat like that for maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Time had stopped. He looked down at our joined hands. "I want you to choose me when you feel safe. Eliza," he said, his voice very clear in the quiet, "not when you feel empty." The words hit me harder than any fist. He saw it. He saw the void Brent had left. He knew I was a wreck, a hollowed-out space, and he was actively, deliberately refusing to use that against me. He was giving me a boundary. He was giving me back my own choice. The main power of the restaurant clicked on. The harsh fluorescent light from the dining room flooded the cellar through the glass, shattering the warm, amber bubble. The spell was broken. He stood, pulling me gently to my feet, and he didn't kiss me again. He just held my hand for a second longer before letting go. He retrieved his vest from the crate, shaking it out. When we stepped out of the cellar, the rain had stopped. The night was quiet. Rook was waiting by the front door, which was now unlocked. The black SUV was idling at the curb, the street already drained, as if the flood had never even happened. Soren walked me to the car. As I got in, I realized something. For the past week, my apartment, my clothes, my skin, it all smelled faintly of old fear, a coppery, stale scent I couldn't wash out. But now, standing next to him, all I could smell was the clean scent of his shirt, the faint, dry wool smell of his vest, and something else, something warm and safe, and uniquely him. His scent had covered the smell of fear. As Rook drove me home, I stared out the window. I wasn't empty. I wasn't safe. Not really. But what I felt for the first time was a sharp, clear, unmistakable desire. A desire that had boundaries, and he was the one who had built them. The bubble of peace, the one that had formed in the amber light of the wine cellar, lasted exactly 2 days. 2 days of going to class, working my shifts, and feeling the steady, invisible presence of the black SUV down the street. It was a new kind of normal, a fragile one, but it was mine. Then, on Monday, as I was walking out of my pharmacology lecture, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from a number with a strange, impossible-to-place area code. There was a photo. My blood went cold, colder than the ice pack Soren had pressed to my wrist. It was a picture of me, right now. Walking down the steps of the community college building, my EMT textbook open in my hand, it was grainy, taken from a distance, probably from a parked car across the street. Underneath it, one line of text. "Looking good, Quinn." I stopped dead on the sidewalk. My breath seized in my chest. It wasn't Brent. The tone was wrong. It wasn't his sloppy, desperate anger. This was cold, possessive. This was an observation, like I was a stalk he was tracking. My fingers fumbled in my pocket, my thumb instinctively searching for the keychain where I'd clipped the small panic button Soren had given me, the one I'd transferred from under the counter. Before I could even touch it, a shadow fell over me. "Miss Quinn," I yelped, spinning around. It was Rook. He wasn't in the SUV. He was on foot, right behind me, appearing from nowhere like he was part of the architecture. "How?" I stammered, holding the phone up like a shield. He didn't look at it. "The boss wants to see you. We're not going to your apartment." He didn't wait for an answer. He just gestured with his head toward the street, where the black SUV was idling, the side door already open. It wasn't a request. It was, as Soren had said, an extraction. I got in. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "Looking good. Quinn." We didn't drive toward my neighborhood. We went toward the river, deep into the industrial sector, where the smell of creosote and river silt hung heavy in the air. We passed rows of silent, corrugated steel warehouses, finally turning into a secured compound surrounded by a 12-foot-high fence topped with razor wire. The sign outside was the same one from the black card. Harborline Import Company, authorized personnel only. Rook drove the SUV directly inside one of the warehouses, the massive roll-up door sliding shut behind us with a heavy, final thud. This was not a Mafia den. It was a logistics hub. It was cavernous, clean and brightly lit with fluorescent lights. Miles of steel shelving held massive, plastic-wrapped pallets. Forklifts were parked in neat, charging rows. The air smelled of cardboard, machine oil, and coffee. In the center of the vast floor was a glass-walled office, a kind of cube inside. Soren was standing over a massive digital table, the kind architects use. It was glowing with a map. He looked up as I entered. He wasn't in a suit. He was in the same practical, rolled-up sleeves look from my apartment. He looked like a general. "Show him," he said, his voice flat. He didn't greet me. Rook gently took my phone from my shaking hand. He handed it to a woman I hadn't noticed, who was sitting at a bank of computers. She looked to be in her late 20s, with severe black-framed glasses and her hair pulled back in a ruthlessly tight bun. She plugged my phone into a device. "Spoofed," she said, her voice sharp, all business. "IP is bounced through 3 states, Texas, Oregon, Florida. Amateur hour obfuscation. The text itself originated from a burner app popular with the longshoremen on the West Bank." She typed, her fingers flying. "Got it. The app is a closed-channel gossip board. They're passing your picture around." My stomach turned to water. "Passing it, why?" "Leverage," Soren said. He tapped the glowing map. It wasn't a street map. It was the Mississippi River, a winding snake of blue light, dotted with red and green icons. "This is our world. Eliza, the harbor, the barges, the transfer points, the bridges that move goods from ship to shore. We run 70% of the legitimate import-export through this channel." "And they run the rest," May said, spinning in her chair. She pointed to a cluster of red icons south of the city. "The Swamp Consortium, a rival transport group. They don't like our efficiency. They prefer to move things undeclared." "Rivals," I said, my voice thin. "So what does this have to—" "Brent Tolley," May cut in, her voice bored, as if reading a grocery list. "He owes them, not just a little, he owes them, let's see, just over $70,000. A combination of gambling debts and a loan for a block of party supplies he subsequently lost." I felt dizzy. 70,000. "They own him," Soren said, his voice quiet. He was watching my face, gauging my reaction, and when he couldn't pay, they offered him a new deal. Information. "Information on you," May finished. You're the girl the new boss of Harborline is seen with, the girl he pulls from an alley, the girl he sits with in a rainstorm. The gossip app, the text message. They're using me to get to you. They are using you as a soft asset, Soren corrected, and the coldness in his voice made my skin crawl. They think if they put pressure on you, I'll back off a new port contract I'm bidding on. They think I'm distracted. They think I'm weak. They're sloppy, May said, turning back to her screen, and they're leveraging a fool. As if summoned, a new window popped up on her monitor. It was a video, a live feed. Brent, he was in a dark, sweaty club, wearing headphones, bobbing his head behind a DJ setup. He was wearing a new, hideously thick silver chain. He's live streaming his set, May said with a predator's smile. Right now. He can't help himself. He thinks he's a star. The chain, Soren said, pointing. Already on it, May said. He bought it 2 hours ago. The reflection zoom enhance. The logo of the bar, a stylized neon alligator, was visible, reflected in the gaudy links. Got his location, a backwater bar in St. Bernard Parish. It's one of their main fronts. Soren looked at Rook. He didn't speak. He just nodded. Then he looked back at the glowing map of the river. He was silent for a full minute, his hand on his chin. I watched the scar on his jaw tighten. I was waiting for the order, the one that sent Rook and a team of men to that bar. I was waiting for the violence. No, Soren said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. No bloodshed. He looked at May. They want to play a corporate game. We'll play a corporate game. We squeeze their wallets, not their throats. Get me the Tri-Parish Task Force. May's smile was thin and sharp. The real one or our one? Both, Soren said. I want an official leak, a press release, effective immediately. The Tri-Parish Organized Crime Task Force is launching an unscheduled audit of all non-containerized shipping manifests on the Mississippi, citing anonymous tips regarding customs fraud. May was already typing. The real task force owes us a favor after that tip on the shipping containers last month. They'll leak it. The consortium will see it on the 5 o'clock news. They'll panic, Soren said, tapping the red icons on the map. They'll halt their shipments. They'll try to move their product to dry land before the inspectors arrive. But they won't know, May added, that the inspectors are arriving, just not the ones they're expecting. Soren looked at Rook. The safety cover, your team. Now. Contract law, May said, her eyes gleaming behind her glasses. We'll do the rest. I didn't go home. Rook drove me, but not to my apartment. He took me to a high, grassy levee overlooking the river, from half a mile away. I watched. At first, nothing. Just the slow, brown churn of the Mississippi. Then, around 4 p.m., I saw the panic. A text must have gone out. On the opposite bank, at a private, unmarked pier. I saw activity. Men. Small as ants, scrambling. They were moving things off a barge, fast, onto waiting trucks. Then, a white van pulled up. It didn't look like an SUV. It looked official. It had a logo on the side. Gulf Coast Dock and Safety Audits. Rook's team? It was anticlimactic. It was beautiful. There were 6 of them. They got out, wearing bright yellow reflective vests and hard hats. They were carrying clipboards. One of them had a drone, the kind real estate agents use. They didn't storm the pier. They didn't draw weapons. They just walked up to the panicked men and started talking, pointing at the clipboards, gesturing to the barge, then to the trucks. The men from the consortium just stopped. They looked at the clipboards. They looked at the official-looking vests. They looked up at the drone, which was now buzzing quietly overhead, its camera blinking. They didn't know if this was real. They didn't know if these were cops or feds or just auditors. It was the GIB strategy, but on a massive industrial scale. The illusion of authority, backed by the reality of a high-definition camera. I watched the men argue. I watched them make frantic phone calls. I watched the man with the clipboard just stand there, patient, unmoved. Then, one by one, the consortium men got back in their trucks, and they drove away. They left the half-unloaded barge sitting at the pier, a sitting duck. Rook got back in the SUV. May's team is moving in. He rumbled, "Legal." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small. "Now," Rook said, "they're in breach. They abandoned unsecured cargo on a leased dock in violation of about 50 federal and state environmental regulations. Harborline's legal department will file an injunction. We'll seize the cargo as a collateral payment, legally." They didn't fire a shot. They didn't punch anyone. They just filed paperwork. I thought about my EMT training, about learning how to stop a bleed with pressure, how to force air into lungs. I was learning to save one life at a time, with my hands, with grit and adrenaline. I had just watched Soren Marchese save his entire operation, and my life along with it, without ever raising his voice. He'd done it with a fake press release, a set of reflective vests, and a deep understanding of contract law. The power of it was terrifying. It wasn't the brute force of Brent, it was the invisible, crushing force of the system itself, wielded as a weapon. He hadn't just moved a mountain, he'd convinced the mountain to move itself, and he'd done it by sending it a registered letter. The bubble of peace, the one that had formed in the amber light of the wine cellar, lasted exactly 2 days. 2 days of going to class, working my shifts, and feeling the steady, invisible presence of the black SUV down the street. It was a new kind of normal, a fragile one, but it was mine. Then, on Monday, as I was walking out of my pharmacology lecture, my phone buzzed. It was the photo, looking good, Quinn. The consortium wasn't just a corporate rival. They were on my street. I had just watched Soren dismantle their operation on the river with clipboards and legal filings, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood, that they wouldn't just write it off as a loss. They would see it as an escalation. I started my next shift at Laveau, but the restaurant felt wrong. The air was thick with paranoia. Every customer who looked at me for a second too long. Every phone I saw pointed in my general direction, made my skin crawl. Soren must have known. He didn't text. He just showed up, not at the restaurant, but at my apartment at 10 a.m., just as I was leaving for class. Rook was with him, and so was May, the legal aid. She looked even sharper in the daylight, her presence an intrusion in my shabby apartment. "We have a leak," May said. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She was holding a tablet, your shift schedule, your class schedule, your roommate's work hours. It wasn't Brent, it came from inside the brasserie. My stomach dropped. Then who? "The consortium plays the same game we do," Soren said. He was leaning against the doorframe, his presence filling my small apartment. "They look for debt. They look for leverage. They don't threaten when a bribe will do." "Darla," I whispered. I saw her face in the alley, that night with Brent, the click of the closing door, fear, calculation. May nodded, tapping the tablet. "Darla Stokes, 4 credit cards, all maxed out, a high-interest signature loan from a payday lender we trace back to a consortium holding. They didn't threaten her. They just offered to pay it off. All she had to do was text them a photo of the weekly schedule pinned up in her office. She's been doing it for 2 weeks. I waited for the hot flash of anger, for the sense of betrayal, but all I felt was a vast, gray weariness. Darla wasn't evil. She was just weak. She was just another version of Brent, trapped in a cage of her own bad decisions. "She's scared," I said. "She's a liability," May countered, her voice sharp as glass. "She's both," Soren said, cutting May off. His eyes met mine. "The consortium now sees you as a confirmed asset. They know the protection on the street is too heavy. They'll try to get to you inside. You're not safe here. You're not safe at Laveau." "Not safe?" I looked at Rook, who was standing like a statue by the stairs. "You have a man outside my door 24/7. "That's defense," Soren said. "They just changed the game. Now we play offense. You're coming with me. Pack a bag. 3 days. "Where?" "Somewhere they can't use clipboards. Somewhere the internet is bad." An hour later, I was in the back of the black SUV, my cheap canvas duffel bag next to Soren's expensive leather weekender. We drove. We left New Orleans, left the paved roads, the city grid. We drove south, deep into St. Bernard Parish, where the land dissolves into the water. The air got thicker, saltier. The road turned to gravel, then to a raised dirt levee, and finally just ended. Rook stopped at a small, private landing. There was an airboat and a smaller, flat-bottomed skiff tied to a weathered pier. Soren got out, turning to Rook. "You have the perimeter." Rook just nodded, already unloading gear I couldn't see from the back long, pelican cases that did not look like they held fishing rods. Soren led me to the skiff. "You know how to drive one of these?" "I'm an EMT student from Ohio," I said, my voice shaky. "No." "You'll learn." He untied the boat and started the small outboard motor. It coughed to life, and we slid into the bayou. It was beautiful and terrifying. The water was like polished black glass, reflecting the massive, bearded cypress trees. White egrets stood like silent, judgmental statues in the reeds. After 20 minutes of weaving through channels that all looked identical to my untrained eye, he pointed. "There. Maison du Sel, the salt house." It wasn't a house. It was a cabin. Maybe, but built high up on 12-foot stilts, rising straight out of the water. It was weathered gray wood, surrounded by a wide wraparound porch. It was isolated. The only way in or out was by boat. It was a fortress of water and wood. The inside was simple, clean and masculine, a lot of dark wood, a solid kitchen counter, and a big, comfortable-looking couch. It smelled like cedar and salt. "My grandfather built this," Soren said, setting his bag down. "He and my father used to run shrimp traps out here." "And you?" "I run Harbor Line," he said, as if that explained everything. There was no pretense, no guest room. There was one main room and one bedroom. He threw his bag in the bedroom, mine on the couch, a clear, unspoken boundary. That night, he taught me to cook. Not heat up, but cook. He pulled ingredients from a high-tech, solar-powered refrigerator sausage, shrimp, the holy trinity of onions, celery, and peppers. "Jambalaya," he announced, "my mother's recipe." As he chopped, I just watched. He put on music, not opera, not classical. It was old, crackling New Orleans brass, a horn section that sounded like it was having the time of its life. "She loved this," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "My father, he was a hard man, all structure, all business, like the Harbor Line. My mother, she was the music." He showed me how to brown the sausage, how to stir the rice. We worked side by side in the small kitchen, our elbows brushing. It was the most normal, domestic thing I had ever done. Later, on the porch, he taught me knots. He had a length of thick mooring rope. "This is a bowline, he said, his strong, clean fingers looping the rope. "It holds under pressure, but it never jams. You can always untie it." He made me practice, his hands guiding mine, his warmth against my skin, until I got it right. A knot that holds, but always lets go. The metaphor was so heavy I almost laughed. The second night, the piece broke. We were on the porch again. The humidity was a thick, wet blanket. The sky was starless. The only sound was the chirping of insects, a deafening, thousand-voice choir. Then a new sound. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It was distant, a boat engine, but not a skiff, something bigger, heavier. Soren was on his feet in an instant. The man who cooked jambalaya was gone. The boss of Harbor Line was back. "Inside," he whispered. He didn't move. He tapped his watch. And the house went dark. Not just the lights, everything. The fridge, the music, the small security light on the pier. Total darkness. "Rook," he murmured. "He cut the generator." I looked out over the water. Rook was nowhere to be seen, but I knew he was out there, in the reed banks, watching. The thrum, thrum, thrum got closer, then stopped. Silence. The insects, too, had gone quiet. And then I saw it. A single red light moving through the air, a drone. "They're running thermal," Soren whispered, pulling me back from the doorway, into the shadow. "They're looking for our heat signatures." The red light zipped over the water, making a high electronic whine. It hovered over the house, scanning. My heart was in my throat. We were trapped. "Wait for it," Soren breathed. The drone moved past the house, toward a dense thicket of cypress to the west. It hovered, dipped, and vanished. The red light just went out, like a snuffed candle. "What?" "A blind zone," Soren said. "Rook set up a broad-spectrum jammer in those trees. The signal hits it. The drone's protocols tell it to return to home. But the jammer blocks that, too. It just falls in the water." He tapped his watch again. The generator sputtered back to life. The lights came on. The music, a lonely saxophone, picked up right where it left off. I was shaking. My entire body was vibrating. Soren looked at me, his face grim in the low light. "They're desperate. That was a test. They know we're here. They know we were here." He held out a hand. "Come on." He led me back onto the porch. The insects had started their song again. He didn't let go of my hand. "Whoa, we can't just dance," I said, my voice incredulous, as he pulled me gently toward him. The saxophone was playing something slow and bluesy. "We have to wait," he said. "Rook needs an hour to sweep the water, retrieve the hardware. We need to act normal, just in case they have a second one." He pulled me close. It was not like the wine cellar. This was different. The air was too hot, too thick. We were both sweating from the humidity and the fear. His shirt was damp. He put his hand, not on my waist, but low, on the curve of my hip. It was a gesture of unmistakable possession. Not violent, but absolute. I was too tired to stand. I let my head rest against him, my forehead finding the strong, warm column of his neck. I breathed in his scent, salt, cedar, and him. We moved, barely, a slow two-step shuffle to the rhythm of the saxophone. My heart was hammering. I could feel his, steady and slow, beneath my hand, which was flat against his chest. His breath was warm on my hair. "They're not going to stop," I whispered against his skin. "No," he said. "I'm scared, Soren." "I know." I tilted my head back. His gray eyes were dark, almost black in the porch light. He was looking at my mouth. He didn't ask this time. He kissed me. It was not the slow, gentle discovery in the cellar. This was deep. This was hungry. It was a kiss fueled by adrenaline and the raw, swampy heat of the night. It was the kiss of a man who had just won a small, invisible battle and was staking his claim on the spoils. But it was just a kiss. My fingers gripped his shirt, balled the fabric in my fists. His hand on my hip held me fast, flush against him. I could feel the solid wall of his chest, the strength in his arms. The kiss was long, breathless, and it was everything except the one thing it wasn't. Our shirts stayed on, our boundaries, the ones he had built, held firm. He was showing me, with every second, that his desire did not have to equal a loss of my control. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against mine. We were both breathing hard, our chests rising and falling. The air was electric. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, and he was already awake. He was at the kitchen table, not with a coffee, but with a map. It was a nautical chart of the parish. It was covered in his neat, black handwriting. "What is that?" I asked, my voice rough with sleep. He looked up. A vision board. It was a battle plan. He had marked primary escape route boat, secondary levee. He had launch point alpha and beta. He had coordinates, radio frequencies, and a set of alphanumeric codes. "Rescue codes," I asked, pointing. "Confirmation codes," he corrected. "For May, to verify it's me on the line. Not a recording, not someone under duress." He had a plan for everything, a plan for the plan failing. He wasn't just reacting. He wasn't just protecting. He was prepared. Brent's entire life was chaos, a series of fires he started and then ran from. Soren lived in a world of equal or greater chaos, but he met it with cold, relentless structure. Seeing that map, seeing the lines and codes, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. It was trust. It was a cold, Hard structural trust. He was a bowline knot. He would hold. His satellite phone buzzed. He checked it. "It's done," he said. "The consortium." "Brent?" He turned the phone so I could see the text from May. "Subject Tolly is in custody. GIB Gulf Region Office, invited to assist with an ongoing investigation into credit card fraud and assault. All known accounts have been frozen pending investigation." He was gone. They had him, the GIB, the fake real agency. They had frozen his accounts, the $70,000 debt to the consortium. He could never pay it now. The consortium would drop him. He was no longer a tool. He was just a liability. I waited for the rush of triumph. I waited to feel happy. I felt nothing, just tired. "I don't want revenge," I said, sitting down across from him. "I never did. I just want it to be quiet. I want to go to my classes and pay my rent. I just want peace." Soren looked up from his map of war, his eyes softening. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Peace," he said, his voice a low, sad truth. "Peace is the rarest commodity in this city. Eliza, you can't earn it. You can't wish for it." He squeezed my hand. "But I will buy it for you, at any legal price." We came back from the salt house on a Sunday morning. The peace Soren had promised the peace he had to buy felt thin, like a single layer of gauze over a deep wound. I felt the trust, the one forged from his battle maps and the steady beat of his heart on the porch. But it was a cold, structural trust. It didn't make the world outside any less sharp. I went back to work. Soren didn't want me to. "It's not safe. Eliza, May has confirmed Darla is compromised. It's the one place they can touch you." "They're not going to make me a refugee in my own life," I argued, my voice tight. "I'm not going to hide in your warehouse while you handle things. I go to work. I go to class. That's the deal." He relented, but the cost was Rook. The black SUV was no longer a subtle presence down the street. It was parked, massive and unmoving, directly across from Laveau for every second of my shift. A fortress. Sunday night was the end of a brutal double. The restaurant had been full of tourists and football fans, all demanding, all needy. My feet were screaming. All I wanted was to cash out, go home, and fall into bed. But I couldn't. "Has anyone seen Darla?" I asked, walking into the back office. It was empty. The small metal safe under her desk was open. The tip jar, where we all pooled our credit card tips for the week, was empty. The small cash bag for the register was also gone. And on her desk, a single, folded piece of paper. My name was scrawled on it. I opened it. The handwriting was a frantic, looping mess. "Eliza, I'm so sorry. I didn't have a choice. They forced me. They knew about my cards. They paid them off. And then they just owned me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." My heart didn't break. It just seized. That click of the door in the alley. It wasn't just fear. It was guilt. I pulled out my phone. My thumb went straight to Soren's number. "She's gone," I said, my voice flat. There was no emotion in it. "Darla. She ran. She cleaned out the safe and the tip jar." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line, just his breathing. "Stay in the office," he commanded. His voice was cold. "Lock the door. Rook is coming in. May is checking something." I heard the beep as he hung up. Less than 30 seconds later, the back door of the restaurant opened and the solid, unmovable shadow of Rook filled the frame. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, blocking the only exit. My phone rang again. It was May. "It's not Darla," she said, no greeting. "What?" I looked at the note, still in my hand. The note she stole the money. "The note is a diversion." May's voice was sharp, impatient. "The theft is a misdirection. The consortium needed a reason for her to disappear. They let her go. She was just the scheduler. Eliza, she was low level. The real asset is still inside the building." My blood ran cold. Rook was blocking the door, but we were still inside. "Who?" I whispered, my eyes darting to the kitchen. "Remy," May said, "the sous chef." I almost dropped the phone. Remy, the one who was always whistling when I walked by the pass, the one who always made some slick, half-joking comment, the one who—
"Oh, got it!"
2 days ago, I whispered. He found my hair tie by the grease traps. He said I'd dropped it. I'd been so grateful. I hadn't even thought— He didn't find it, May said, and I could hear the clack of her keyboard. He rigged it. We've had a ping on an unregistered tracker following you. We thought it was the SUV, a tail. It's not. It's on you. Right now. Check your hair tie. My hands were shaking. I ripped the black elastic band from my ponytail. My fingers, clumsy with panic, probed the thick fabric, and there it was. A tiny, cold plastic disc, the size of a quarter, skillfully stitched into the inner seam. An AirTag. He'd been tracking me. To my apartment, to class. He knew every move I made. The blood rushed from my head, and the room spun. Rook took the hair tie from my trembling fingers. He looked at it, his face a mask of bored disgust. He pulled a small, heavy-duty utility knife from his belt, slit the fabric, and popped the tiny disc out. He didn't crush it. He just slipped it into his own pocket. "Soren," May said, her voice still in my ear. "She's right, it's active." Soren's voice took over the line. "May has control of the signal. She's spoofing it. Rook is going to Algiers. He's taking your location with him. The consortium is setting a meet. They think they're pulling you to them." "Good," I said, the numbness turning to a cold, hard anger. "Rook will take you to the warehouse." Soren continued. "You'll stay with May until this is done." "No." The word was out of my mouth before I could even think. It was absolute. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. "This is not a discussion, Eliza," he said, his voice dropping to that ice-cold temperature that stopped my breathing. "You told me," I said, my voice shaking, but my resolve hardening, "that you wanted me to choose. I'm choosing. I am not hiding in a warehouse while you handle my life. I'm tired of running. Soren, I ran from Brent. I ran with you to the swamp. Running just teaches them how to chase. I'm going with you." "Absolutely not. It's a setup. It's hostile." "And I'm the bait," I was almost shouting now. "I am the reason. I am not going to be a package you keep safe. I am going to be the person who watches this end. I am going to Algiers." He argued. For 10 solid minutes, his voice was a razor. He told me I was a civilian, that I was a liability, that I was untrained. I just kept repeating it. "I won't run. I won't run." Finally, a long, ragged sigh. "You will stay in the car. You will not, under any circumstances. Get out. The car will be locked. The glass is 3/4 of an inch thick. Is that clear?" "Clear," I said, my heart hammering. The abandoned port in Algiers was a graveyard of rusting shipping containers, skeletal cranes, and the thick, heavy smell of river silt. Soren pulled the SUV into the deep shadow of a collapsed warehouse, maybe 200 yards from a small clearing. He killed the engine. Rook wasn't with us. He was already here, a ghost in the shadows, carrying my location in his pocket. We waited. The silence was absolute. Then, headlights, 3 sets, a convoy of heavy-duty trucks, the kind used for hauling, rolled into the clearing and formed a half circle. Men piled out, maybe 8 of them. The leader was a short, barrel-chested man in an expensive suit that was too tight for him. I saw Remy, the sous chef, looking green and terrified. And Brent. My blood turned to ice. They were holding him by the arms, half dragging him. He looked awful. Pale, shaking, wearing the same clothes I'd last seen him in. He looked broken. "They're trying to trade," Soren whispered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. A directional microphone must have been planted by Rook. May's voice, clean and sterile, suddenly came through the car's Bluetooth speaker. It was the barrel-chested man, yelling, "A simple exchange, a gesture of goodwill. We give you back your girlfriend's pathetic ex-boyfriend. You wipe the seizure on our cargo, and we forget this whole misunderstanding." A slimy laugh. "Of course," the man continued. If the girl doesn't show up, we can't guarantee Mr. Tolley's cooperation with the GIB, and we'd be very disappointed. We might just want to borrow her for a night. You understand? A psychological blow. Stay in the car, Soren ordered, his voice flat. He put his hand on the door. You're not armed, I said, stating the obvious. Paper is sharper than steel. He said. He got out. He walked into the glare of their headlights. His hands were empty, open at his sides. He wasn't wearing a jacket, just his shirt sleeves, rolled to the elbow. Looked like an accountant about to deliver a very bad audit. Evening, gentlemen. Soren's voice was calm, carrying in the damp air. I believe there's a misunderstanding about who is trading what. The barrel-chested boss laughed. You're the big boss. You brought paperwork. Soren was holding a single folded sheaf of papers. I did, he said. This is a bill for the seizure of your illegal, unsecured cargo which you abandoned. This is the fine from the EPA, which my company paid on your behalf to avoid a federal investigation. And this is the breach of contract lawsuit May filed an hour ago, citing the force majeure of your own incompetence. You're joking with maritime law, gentlemen, and the law doesn't have a sense of humor. Brent saw his opening. He saw Soren alone, and he saw his last desperate chance. He lunged away from his captors, his face a mask of terror and rage. He's lying, Brent shrieked, his voice cracking. He's the criminal. He planted that GIB badge. He's the one you want. He's the one who set you up. He pointed, not at Soren, but at the dark shadow of the SUV. He'd seen us. She's in there. Eliza, tell them what he did. I did what Soren told me not to do. I opened the door and got out. The world stopped. All 8 men. Soren, Brent, they all stared. The humid air was so thick I could barely breathe. Brent's face contorted in a mask of desperate, toxic triumph. Eliza, yes, tell them. I walked, my legs shaking, until I was just at the edge of the headlight beams. I could feel the heat from the engines. I looked at the barrel-chested man. I looked at Remy, who looked like he was going to be sick. Then I looked at Brent. He's right, I said. Soren went absolutely rigid. I could see the muscle in his jaw clench. Soren Marchesi did step in, I continued, my voice clear, not shaking. He stepped in because you put your hands on me. Brent, he stepped in because you are a liability. But you've got one thing wrong. I took a step toward him, into the full, harsh glare. I am not yours. I was never yours. I turned to the barrel-chested man, and I am not his, I said, gesturing to Soren. I'm not a soft asset for you to trade. I'm not a piece of leverage. I'm just the woman who's tired of all of you. Brent screamed. It was a wordless sound of pure, animal rage. He lunged at me. He never made it. Whump, whump, whump! Sirens, not one, a dozen. Lights, blinding, strobing blue and red, flashing from every direction, bouncing off the rusting containers. The graveyard lit up like a stadium. Tri-Parish Task Force, hands in the air on the ground, now. It wasn't just the one fake car, it was real. NOPD cruisers, state police, and 2 of the black and white task force cars the real partners May had activated. The consortium men froze. Half of them put their hands up, their faces a mask of disbelief. The other half ran, scattering into the darkness. Soren didn't move. He just watched, his hands still at his sides. The barrel-chested boss looked at the contracts in his hand. He looked at the police swarming his men. He looked at Soren, who hadn't flinched. He understood. This wasn't a bust. This was a negotiation. A hostile takeover, conducted with badges. He walked over to Soren, took the pen from Soren's shirt pocket, and signed the papers. I saw Rook then. He materialized from the shadows near Remy. He wasn't even looking at the boss. He was looking at the sous chef, who was trying to slip away in the confusion. And then the most amazing thing happened. One of the consortium's own men, the one who had been holding Brent, saw Remy trying to bolt. He tackled him, hard. This one, the goon shouted, pointing at Remy as a real cop ran over. It was his intel. He brought us here. He set us up. Rook, his face impassive, pulled a plastic zip tie from his pocket and threw it to the goon. The man, furious at being played, cinched Remy's hands behind his back himself. It was over in 3 minutes. No shots fired, no punches thrown, except the one that took Remy down. The consortium boss was in a low, intense conversation with a very real, very stern-looking detective. The other men were being cuffed. Brent was just sitting on the wet pavement, sobbing, completely irrelevant. Soren walked over to me. His face was granite. He was furious. "You got out of the car." "I had to," I said, my voice low. "He called for me. I had to close that door. For me." He stared at me for a long, heavy second. The anger in his eyes didn't fade, but something else joined it. Something I'd seen on his face in the swamp. Respect. Cold, hard, structural respect. He just nodded. Once. "Let's go home." As we walked back to the SUV, I saw the barrel-chested boss being led away. He wasn't in cuffs. He was consulting. He'd been played, outmaneuvered, and legally dismantled in front of his own men and the actual police. His honor, his reputation on the docks, had just been completely, bloodlessly unscrewed, bolt by bolt. The aftermath of the Algiers port was a strange, hollow quiet. The consortium, broken by a combination of legal contracts and public police raids, had fractured. The barrel-chested boss had flipped, turning state's evidence in exchange for May's very generous legal protection, and was now a consultant for the GIB. Remy, the sous chef, had been charged, his betrayal earning him a one-way ticket to a federal holding cell. Darla was a ghost, vanished into the system with her stolen tip money. A problem for another day. The city felt scrubbed. But Brent was the loose end. He wasn't law, and he wasn't underworld. He was just chaos. The task force hadn't arrested him at the port. He was too small, too irrelevant. A piece of human driftwood nobody bothered to claim. They had simply let him go. A sobbing, terrified mess disappearing into the night. For 2 days, I lived in that quiet. Soren was distant. He was giving me space. The black SUV a respectful 2 blocks away from my apartment, not its usual sentinel post. I went to class. I read my textbooks. I waited for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on the 3rd morning. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. My stomach, which had finally started to unknot, cinched tight. "You think you're safe? You're nothing without him. Just a waitress he bought. He'll get tired of you. And I'll be waiting." I read the text. The old Eliza would have cried. The old Eliza would have felt the spike of fear, the terror of his possessiveness. But I wasn't the old Eliza. I just felt tired, tired of his voice, tired of his shadow. He was the last door, the last one I had to close myself, or I'd be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. I didn't call Soren, I called May. "I need to see him," I said, my voice flat. There was a crisp silence. "Soren's orders are total isolation. You are not to engage. He's unpredictable. He's a non-state actor. Eliza. We can't model his behavior." "Soren's orders are about protecting his asset," I said, my voice cold. "This is about my life. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for tools. I'm not going to fight him. May. I'm going to file him." There was another pause. I heard a faint smile in her voice. "Filing. That's good. I can work with filing. Where?" "The Orpheon, the old theater on Rampart Street. He used to get cheap DJ sets there. Practice in the empty hall. He feels big there. He'll be there." "Give me 2 hours," May said. "And Eliza, don't go alone. That's not a request from Soren. That's a directive from legal." "I won't be alone," and I said, "I'll have you." We met at a coffee shop in the French Quarter. May slid a thick, heavy manila envelope across the table. It felt like it was full of bricks. "This is an exit package," May said, tapping the envelope. Her glasses were sharp, her gaze sharper. "You are the administrator of his severance. You are not his ex-girlfriend. You are not his victim. You are a representative of Harborline, offering a one-time, conditional separation." I opened it. My God. First, a pre-filled, notarized temporary protective order. Second, a glossy brochure for a 3-month minimum residential rehabilitation program in northern Louisiana. Third, a formal job offer. On Harborline Import Company. Letterhead. Warehouse logistics, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Hard labor. Fourth, a paper voucher for a 60-day stay at a clean, secure, single-residence housing unit downtown. "He doesn't get any of it," May said, her voice like ice, "until he signs this." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was thick, creamy cardstock, a mutual no-contact and liability agreement. It was dense with terrifying legal language, but it was the watermark that made my breath catch. It was the seal, the embossed, official, terrifying seal of the Gulf Integrity Bureau. "He signs," May said, "and he gets the package, a chance, a hard one, but a chance. He violates the agreement and the GIB's file on him becomes active. The charges from the port assault, aiding and abetting, resisting, they all materialize. It's his choice." I slid the papers back into the envelope. I was no longer shaking. I was an administrator. I walked out of the coffee shop. Soren's SUV was parked across the street, the engine idling. He got out as I approached. He wasn't angry. He just looked worried. The raw, human emotion was so stark on his usually controlled face that it almost broke my resolve. "May told me," he said, his voice low. "I have to do this, Soren, not you, not Rook, me." He held my gaze for a long time. I could see the war behind his eyes, the protector fighting the pragmatist. "He's a cornered animal, Eliza. You don't know what he'll do." "Yes, I do," I said. "He'll posture, he'll yell, and then he will fold. He's a bully, and he's a coward. I know him." He nodded. Slowly. He accepted my assessment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, quarter-sized panic button. He pressed it into my palm. "I won't be far," he said. "I'll be in the wings, in the back of the house. I will not move. I will not make a sound unless you press this button. But the second you do, I'm there." He was giving me the stage. He was trusting my choice. The Orpheon Theater was a cathedral of decay. Dust motes danced in the few beams of light that pierced the boarded-up windows. The velvet seats were torn, their stuffing spilling out like cotton entrails. It smelled of mold, dust, and old beer. The only light was from the single, bare, ghost light bulb on the center of the stage. He was there. He was sitting on the edge of the stage, drinking from a bottle in a brown paper bag. He looked ravaged. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes stiff with dirt. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, pathetic and toxic all at once. He heard my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty hall. He looked up. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Well, he slurred, his voice bouncing off the high ceiling. "The Queen comes down from the castle. He finally let you off your leash." I stopped at the edge of the stage, a good 10 feet from him. "I'm not on a leash. Brent." "Sure looks like it." He took a long pull from the bottle. "Got his big guard dog outside. Or did he just send you to dump me for good?" "I'm here alone." I said, "It was the truth. Soren was a block away, in the alley. I came to give you this." I placed the heavy manila envelope on the dusty stage floor, then stepped back to my safe distance. He laughed, a wet, choking sound. "What is it? My walking papers you paying me off? How much is he paying you? Eliza, what's your price?" He grabbed the envelope, ripped it open. The papers spilled out. He saw the rehab brochure first. "Oh, that's Rich. You think you can fix me." He crumpled it and threw it. He saw the Harborline job offer. 6 a.m. warehouse, is this a joke? He sneered, his face turning purple. He saw the housing voucher. 60 days. Wow, 60 whole days. You're so generous. He saw the protective order. You're filing on me. After what he did, I'm the one who needs protection. He was winding up, his rage building, his chest puffing up. He was about to lunge. He was about to throw it all in my face. And then he saw the last page, the agreement. He stopped. He picked it up, his trembling fingers tracing the paper. He saw the watermark, the embossed seal of the GIB. All the air went out of him. The bourbon, the rage, the self-pity, it all vanished, sucked into the vacuum of his terror. He was instantly, horrifyingly sober. He knew that seal. It was the seal on the badge Rook had given him. It was the name on the building they'd invited him to. It was the power that had frozen his accounts, and he must have realized the same power that had just released him, solely for this meeting. He was looking at the difference between a hard life and no life at all. That, I said, my voice steady, echoing in the huge, empty theater, is a choice. Brent, it's the last one I will ever be a part of. You sign that agreement and you get the package. You get a chance, a hard one, a real one. You get the job, you get the room, you get the help. I took a breath. You walk away from that table and you get nothing. May files the protective order. The GIB file on you becomes active and you are done. He looked at me, his eyes wide, searching my face for the old Eliza, the one who cried, the one who flinched, the one who would back down. She wasn't there. I was the administrator. I was the one with the paperwork. I am not yours, I said, my voice strong, not a tremor in it. I am not his trophy. I am not a soft asset for anyone to trade. I am done. This is the last door, Brent, the very, very last door I will ever open for you. He sank to his knees. He looked at the paper. He looked at the job offer. He looked at the voucher, a lifeline, a hard, cold, unforgiving lifeline. He fumbled in his pockets. He didn't have a pen. I pulled one from my purse. I slid it across the dusty stage. It stopped right in front of him. He crawled forward. He braced the thick paper on the dirty, splintered wood of the stage. He uncapped the pen, and with a shaky, pathetic scrawl, he signed his name. He pushed the paper back toward me. I stepped forward, took my copy, and left the severance package for him. May will file this by noon. The voucher code is active. The job starts Monday. Don't mess it up, Brent. I turned my back on him. I didn't run. I walked, my footsteps even and clear, up the long, dark aisle. I reached the back of the theater, in the deep shadows of the lobby. A hand found mine, strong, warm, and steady. Soren. He was standing in the alcove, by the ruined concession stand. He'd been there the whole time. His thumb, I saw, was resting on his own phone, ready to hit the call button for Rook. He hadn't interfered. He'd let me close my own door. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He just squeezed my hand. He stepped out onto the mezzanine, his presence filling the vast, dark space. He looked down at the small, broken figure of Brent, still kneeling on the stage. Soren's voice wasn't loud, but it filled the entire theater. It was the voice of a man who owned the air. "Mr. Tolley." Brent's head snapped up, his face a mask of pure, abject terror. "You just signed a legally binding contract," Soren continued, his voice cold and precise as a surgeon's blade. "You break the terms of that agreement, you come within 500 feet of her. You text her. You so much as type her name in a search bar and every single door in this city will close to you, legally." Soren paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the GIB seal settle on him. "The Bureau will not be inviting you next time. Do you understand me?" Brent just nodded, a convulsive, spastic motion. Soren turned, his hand still holding mine. "Let's go." We walked out of the dark, moldy theater and into the bright, sharp, late afternoon sun. The city felt loud. Cars were honking. A brass band was playing somewhere on Bourbon. As we reached the SUV, I stopped. I looked at the signed paper in my hand. It wasn't a victory. It was an audit, a closing of the books, a final, definitive click. I finally let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding since that first night I saw him in the alley. It came out as a long, ragged, shuddering exhale. I wasn't crying. I wasn't happy. I was just breathing. The air was clean, and for the first time, It was mine. The morning after the Orpheon, the rain stopped. It was one of those New Orleans mornings that felt like a baptism. The air, scrubbed clean by the storm, was cool and sharp. The sky was a pale, clean blue. The wind off the river carried the scent of salt and wet jasmine. I walked out of my apartment, and for the first time, I didn't scan the street. I didn't check the shadows. I just walked. Weeks turned into a month. The bruises faded. The sprain in my wrist healed. The oppressive humidity of summer broke, and a crisp, promising fall settled over the city. I finished my EMT certification on a bright, windy Tuesday. I sat with a class of 20 other people, all of us in new, stiff uniforms, and received my final patch. I walked out, not with a tray, but with a blue baseball cap that read Delta Emergency Response. The world resettled. Laveau got a new manager, a stern, efficient woman from a corporate restaurant group, the day she started. The black SUV that had been parked 2 blocks away from my apartment simply wasn't there. The protection had been recalled. I was safe. The whispers from the old staff were wild. Remy, the sous chef, hadn't just been fired. Harborline's legal team, May's team, had filed a civil suit against him for corporate espionage and endangerment. He was ruined. Not by a criminal charge, but by a lawsuit he could never hope to fight. And then, one day, Darla came back. She walked into the restaurant during the lunch rush, looking thin and terrified. She went straight to the new manager and handed her an envelope full of cash, every dollar she'd taken. I found her in the alley, in the same spot where Brent had pinned me, smoking a shaking cigarette. "May," she whispered, not looking at me. "That woman is lawyer. She found me. I thought I was done for." "What did she do?" "She paid off my debt," Darla said, her voice cracking. "The real debt, the one to the consortium. She just wiped it. And then she gave me a list of terms. I pay back the restaurant, I work a probationary period. And she's representing me. She's getting the old predatory loans renegotiated. She's fixing it. Soren wasn't just cleaning house. He was rebuilding it." I saw him less. He was busy. The rumors on the docks were that Harborline Import Company was going completely legit. Soren was dissolving the dark storage, the gray market side of the business his father had run. He was pouring millions into automated logistics, transparent customs tracking, and new, above-board contracts. And May, I heard, had a new title. No longer a legal aid. She was Harborline's new director of corporate compliance. "We played the law," she told me, the one time I saw her at the warehouse. "Because it's the only way to live with the law. It's just a better, more stable business model." She was, I realized, the most dangerous person I'd ever met. One night, a Friday, he called, "Walk with me." I met him by the river, at Woldenberg Park. The air was cool. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in dark jeans and a simple black sweater. He looked younger, more relaxed. The lines of tension around his eyes were gone. We walked along the moonwalk, watching the slow, massive progress of a container ship navigating the bend. "You seem different," I said. "I am," he said. "It's one thing to inherit a kingdom, Eliza. It's another thing to rule it. My father built Harborline on shadows and handshakes. I'm rebuilding it on concrete and contracts." He stopped, turning to face me under the yellow glow of a gas lamp. The sound of a distant saxophone drifted over from the quarter. "I'm not the man you met in the restaurant," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm trying not to be." He reached into his pocket. He didn't kneel. He just pulled out a small velvet box. My heart didn't stop. It just waited. He opened it. It wasn't a diamond. It wasn't a statement. It was a ring. Yes, but it was just a thin, simple platinum band, like a piece of structural wire. "This is not a promise of a peaceful life," he said, his gray eyes searching mine. "I don't know what that looks like. I live in a world of logistics and liabilities. And so, now, do..." He didn't take the ring out of the box. "This is a promise of boundaries," he continued, his voice raw and honest. "It's a promise that whatever wall you want to build, I will build it with you. Whatever line you want to draw, I will hold it. You told me you wanted to set our boundaries. I'm asking, where do you want to build them? I looked at the ring, gleaming in the lamplight. It was beautiful. It was a promise of strength, of structure. It was a bowline knot. I reached out. I didn't take the ring. I put my fingers on the box and slowly, gently pushed it closed. I took the small, closed box from his hand and placed it back into his palm. I folded his strong, warm fingers over it. When I wear that, Soren, I whispered, my voice thick, it will be because I choose to, because I'm running to it, not because fear or gratitude or even relief is pushing me from behind. I looked up at him. I'm not that girl anymore, the one who needed a rescuer. I'm the one who's learning to set her own boundaries. I'm almost there, but I have to do it myself. He looked at the closed box in his hand. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was the first one I'd ever truly seen. It lit him from the inside. Okay, he said, just that, okay. He put the box back in his pocket, and then he kissed me. He cupped my face, his hands warm and steady. It wasn't the tentative, gentle kiss of the wine cellar. It wasn't the hot, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the swamp. It was a kiss of absolute, breathtaking, adult gratitude. It was slow. It was deep. It was a kiss that said, I see you, I respect you. I can wait. It was a kiss that wasn't in a hurry to get to the end. It was the kiss of a man who had finally, truly, put down his weapons. My first shift with Delta Response was a graveyard, midnight to 8 in the morning. At 3 a.m., the call came in, a multi-car pileup on the I-10. We hit the lights and the siren. I was sitting in the passenger seat of the ambulance, my heart steady, my hands clear, as the siren wailed, that high, tearing sound cutting through the night. I realized I wasn't flinching. It wasn't a sound of chaos anymore. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a call to action. It was the sound of a door I had chosen to walk through. The old world faded, the consortium, broken and fined, retreated from the port, the tri-parish task force. Its purpose served, dissolved back into a bureaucratic ghost. The rumors of the GIB remained just that, a whisper on the docks, a story to scare rookies. Brent, he just disappeared. His feed went dark. His number was disconnected. Once, I heard a rumor from a dock worker who came into Laveau, said he'd seen him, bussing tables at a fisherman's dive bar, way out in western Louisiana, said he looked clean, quiet. The door was closed. I didn't even have the key anymore. That night, my last night at Laveau, I'd finally saved enough to just be an EMT. Soren came in. It was late, just before closing. He was alone, no rook, no driver. He just walked in, like a normal person. He sat at the bar. You're not working, he observed. I was in my street clothes. Not anymore, I said. I came around the bar, grabbed the pot of dark, sludgy coffee, and poured 2 cups, black. I slid one over to him. He wrapped his hands around the warm ceramic. He looked at my left hand, resting on the polished bar. It was bare. Is it time to wear it yet? He asked, his voice soft. I smiled, a real, slow smile. I put my hand over his, over the warm mug. Almost, and then I said, I start my full-time rotation tomorrow. I need to be just me. Let me do this. Let me set this last boundary. For us. He nodded, turning his hand over to lace his fingers with mine. Okay, he said. He paid for the coffee, and we left. We walked, hand in hand, down the quiet, rain-washed streets toward the river. A lone saxophone was playing St. James Infirmary, the notes hanging, blue and mournful and beautiful, in the night air. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a rescue. Love, I was learning, didn't save you with a magic spell. It was built, slowly, day by day, with discipline, with courage, and with the strength to know which doors finally needed to be closed. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to connect with you. Please If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It helps us a lot. And for extra support, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.